Hey everyone, welcome back to Tech Talk. I am Julia Beauchamp. I am here with Computer World Executive Editor Ken Mingus, as well as CIO's Sharon Florentine. We are going to be talking about the H-1B visa program, some recent updates to it, as well as how it relates to STEM Opt. And as a reminder, we are live on YouTube and on the Computer World LinkedIn page. So if you have any questions, any comments, we will try to get to them towards the end of our broadcast. So feel free to leave them. And thank you so much for tuning in with us today. And Sharon, thank you so much for calling in today. So if you could we discuss maybe some of the more recent changes to the H-1B visa program? I know, Ken, we did a video with Sharon a few...
Yep, it's sort of a follow-up to what we did a little while back.
Yeah, and there were some changes with the H-1B visa program at that time, which included, I believe, some...
There's a greater emphasis on advanced degrees, which has been one of the big changes. I've been sort of surprised to see that, and also these efforts to streamline the application process.
Yeah, I was going to say it, and I believe it also had to deal with sort of how they pick, exactly, it sort of changed how they pick applicants.
Right, exactly. And, it's interesting, one of the things that Sharon's been writing about that I was not aware of is this F1 visa program and how that feeds into the STEM Opt. And I guess we should explain what exactly STEM Opt is, because a lot of people may not be familiar with it. STEM Opt is optional practical training, and it's a way for students in particular who may be on F1 visas to sort of extend their ability to stay here in the U.S. And then that sort of naturally feeds into the possibility of them being able to get an H-1B visa and staying even longer, once they're done with the schooling.
Yeah, and it seems like these F1 visa students. It seems like it seems as though they sort of tend to be master's or graduate level students, because there is sort of what happened with the sort of updates to the program is that there was a push for applicants and preference for applicants with more advanced degrees.
Right, exactly. And, it's interesting because this has always been an issue, or at least in terms of H-1B visas, it's been a real issue in terms of whether or not foreign workers could come to the U.S. and, be hired by companies, whether they were being paid less than U.S. workers would be paid. And the idea that now you've got students who have this F1 visa and then can now get into this STEM Opt program. And I guess, STEM is obviously science, technology, electrical engineering, and mathematics?
I think it's just science, technology, engineering,
mathematics.
Okay,
yeah.
I don't think it needs to be electrical engineering.
Got it, okay.
And that's increasingly important for an IT workforce. Obviously, an IT workforce is going to have a lot of people in their workforce with STEM degrees and in sort of STEM technologies, because you want people who are familiar with computer science, data analytics, data
Not surprising for the tech industry.
Not surprising in the least. And something that we are hoping to touch on today as well is that there seems to be a renewed push for site visits for...
I was just going to say, that's one of the big concerns here is that obviously with ICE in the U.S. Hey, Sharon.
I'm back.
Yay! All right. We were just sort of going through the background, a little bit of, sort of what STEM Opt is, F1 visas. Obviously, you know a lot more about it than we do because you write about it all the time. But we were just sort of giving a little bit of background. Again, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about H-1B visas, the STEM Opt program, some recent changes to the H-1B visa program. What's that?
I said that little background was very comprehensive. That segues really nicely into some of the stuff I wanted to bring up today. You mentioned the ICE site visits, and so that's an interesting issue. Back in August, Forbes reported that ICE had begun doing site checks for third-party STEM Opt employment locations. And I reached out to a number of my CIO sources. And so I was unable to confirm that any of the CIOs that I spoke to, that ICE was ICE had not been doing site checks at their locations, and the Forbes article did not specifically mention which companies or which consulting firms or contractors were subject to those checks. So it's definitely a possibility that those checks could happen. ICE has had the ability to perform those checks since, I believe, second quarter of 2016. Whether or not they are actually happening, I have not been able to get confirmation. But it is definitely well within their legal rights to do so. So it's something that employers definitely want to keep in mind, to have that documentation ready, to make sure that students and visa holders are complying with their training programs and the learning opportunities that they're supposed to.
And while Ken and I were talking, just a few minutes ago, I was saying that it seems as though these obviously are student workers in these STEM opt programs, but would you say it's more so on the graduate and master levels? It's not as many, or is it also undergraduate students as well?
So I'm going to back up and do a quick.
I was just going to ask you if you could. Let's start with the F1 and how we get to STEM opt and how that might feed to H-1Bs. Yeah.
Sure. So F1 is the student visa for international students who are studying in any field in the U.S. And so the OPT, the optional practical training, is Department of Homeland Security's program to offer students, both while they're in school and after they finish their degree, the ability to stay in the U.S. on that F1 study visa without changing their immigration status, and receive training through corporate partners. Companies that employ these folks, they have to be accredited by the Student and Exchange Visitor Program. There is a list on the DHS site called Study in the States. It's a really comprehensive overview of all of these programs and the requirements, both for students and for participating companies. So a school has to become SEVP certified, and then they also have to be enrolled in Customs and Immigration's E-Verify employment eligibility verification program. So then students can go and select one of these schools, and then that ensures that after they finish their degree, that they're eligible for an opt program after graduation. Now, the STEM piece of that is exactly what it sounds like. Companies targeting students with STEM degrees, and as Juliet said, that's science, technology, engineering, and math. And when students select an employer to do their STEM opt training, the employer has to be able to provide a formal documented training program with specific learning objectives that then can be reviewed and checked by DHS and Customs, and have to be 20 hours a week of work for the student.
It sounds like there are a lot more requirements for companies that may be looking to hire, the students who have F1 visas who have opted in to the STEM opt program than companies might be used to if they're just familiar with the H-1B visa program. Is that right? There are a lot more things that they have to worry about?
Yes. Yeah. Especially with the being a student visa, obviously there's not, you don't yet have a degree. You don't yet have that documented benchmark, so to speak, of your knowledge. You're in training, you're studying, and you're working towards, getting that degree, as well as, you could choose to leave the country again after you get your degree, even if you've gone through the training, or if DHS or ICE decides that for whatever reason, students are not complying with their training program, they can be deported, which is pretty chilling.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do we have any statistics at all? I mean, obviously the idea is out there is that ICE could crack down on these things if it wanted to. And you said, the CIOs you've talked to have not been personally affected by something like that. Do we have anything that indicates whether there really has been a crackdown, or is this more sort of a fear that, either the students or visa holders or companies that may be hiring them and using them are worried about, but they haven't seen in practice yet? Do we have any stats or anything like that on that?
That's something I've been trying to dig up. And like I said, I have not been able to find anything so far.
Okay.
From my understanding, it's more of an existential fear at this point. Although, more broadly, the current administration has made no bones about its feelings on immigration, both legal and otherwise. And, it, like I said, it can be pretty chilling. Just at the beginning of this month, the president signed what they're calling a proclamation that's going to make it harder even for legal immigrants and those who are relatives of folks that are already in the country, those with green cards, to go through that process and legally immigrate. The proclamation states that immigrants who don't have health insurance currently, or who aren't able to pay for their medical care out of pocket, are going to be denied the ability to come here. So it's been pretty vague what those income cutoffs are going to be, and even who makes that determination. But that's another factor here, that there seems to be an all fronts push toward restricting immigration in general.
Yeah.
That I think is also having an effect here in the IT and technology industries.
Just a quick reminder, if you're tuning in, that we're talking about the F1 visa, students who have F1 visas, H1B visas, the STEM OPT program, changes to those programs, and sort of how recent crackdowns in the U.S. on immigration in general may be affecting the way those programs work. Have we seen any... or have any companies talked about how they're concerned that these kinds of crackdowns might affect their ability to hire, qualified workers maybe next year or the year after? Is there just sort of, even though we don't know, specifically whether ICE has come in and literally yanked people out and sent them home, whether companies themselves might be more leery of taking on somebody who's got a STEM OPT program or is in the program, and then they might lose them down the road?
I'm not hearing that necessarily, and that could be because for now, at least until the April 2020, the next round of H-1B visas, their workers' H-1Bs filled and working. But, it's definitely something I plan on keeping an eye out for over the next couple months to see.
Okay.
And there are changes to the H-1B visa program, not talking about the F1 anymore, the H-1B visa program, that are going to be implemented in April 2020. Could you just touch on a few of those? I think some of our viewers have a few questions about what exactly those changes will be.
Yes, absolutely. So there were as you mentioned before, and you know what? Let me just pull up my notes on that real quick so I
Sure.
make sure that I am accurately answering those questions. If you don't mind giving me a minute here. Yeah, one of the
Oops, seems
Yeah.
like our connection is acting
Yeah.
up again.
That's all right. But we can just chat a little bit, Ken, about
and then in 2020,
Yep, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm having a little issue here again with my technology.
Sometimes it's friend, sometimes it's a foe.
Yeah, it's being very, very argumentative this morning.
Well,
Um,
we were talking about the story that you had written a little while ago about the changes to H-1B visas, and we had spoken earlier about there's a greater emphasis on advanced degrees. That's one of the big changes. The
Right.
streamlined application process. And I mean, do we have any idea what have they done to sort of streamline this? Is it streamlined for the visa holder or for the companies?
So in that case, and I promise I will come back to the 2020 question. It's I will say that I think it's streamlined for both.
Okay.
For applicants, the application process has been streamlined in that they no longer have to fill out an entire application until they are selected. So it's a much less labor intensive initial application process. And only if they're selected do they have to then fill out the rest of the information that's required. This also makes it a little easier, I think, for companies in that they don't have to sort through piles and piles of that paperwork. They can look at a smaller set of information and make the decision there. So going back to your 2020 question there, that's actually one of the major changes that will go into effect. The registration system will be electronic, entirely electronic, and it will have that shorter version of the application. So, like I said, not only does that streamline some of the administrative and paperwork burden, it also reduces the costs because it's automated, it's electronic, and you're not, for instance, paying a legal firm or an immigration attorney to have to go through that paperwork and do that kind of expensive billed by the hour due diligence.
Related to this, we've got a lot of people asking just about the procedure in general. So is there a link or an article we can give them so they can go find out where to get information to apply, the procedure to apply?
Yes. I would, for H-1B,
yeah, they're asking about
specifically,
H-1B.
or STEM opt, or both?
H-1B.
Okay. I would direct folks to uscis.gov. That's probably the most up-to-date information available. And if you go to the Citizenship and Immigration Services homepage, and then on the top search bar, if you just type in H-1B, they have a pretty comprehensive, and obviously that's straight from the horse's mouth, information and application processes.
Okay. And somebody was asking, is this for Canada? I'm wondering if they're asking if it's for people who live in Canada who want to work in the U.S. That's my assumption. So this is for anybody who is outside of the United States and wants to work here. The H-1B visa.
Yes, correct.
There aren't certain countries that it applies to.
Not that I'm aware of. I
Yeah,
believe
I think it's pretty
believe
much
so,
universal
yeah.
if you're not in the U.S. It's, yeah,
Sort of
it's,
like the
and that would apply
universal.
to Canada and anybody else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's visas to work in the United States.
Yep.
correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
I got another question. Somebody's asking about the DV lottery program and if it works, if it's a genuine program. So do you know what the DV lottery program is?
That one's a new one for me.
I'm wondering if that refers to the diversity lottery program. That's related to immigration.
It does seem like that's referring to the diversity visa lottery.
Okay. So it's legit.
There's a
To it
.gov
and
website.
definitely get back to that person.
Yeah, and that's also, there's information on the USCIS site about
Okay.
that specific diversity program. So they
right.
can, if they go to
Okay.
uscis.gov, they'll be able to find information there. Same way,
Okay.
do a search. It's right there.
Yeah,
And,
my apologies. I wish I could answer that. Sorry.
And a question here about the, looks like it's the STEM Opt program. So how much
Okay.
time does a student have to decide whether they want to go for the Opt program or go back to their respective country? I imagine that's probably on the website too.
I believe that's on the website. Let's see. I know that there's an initial. I'm sorry. Let me get my thoughts together. There's an initial opt period after that takes place for 12 months. And then between that and the STEM opt or the opt extension, which is for an additional 24 months. Between those two, students have to wait 60 days. There's a grace period that DHS implements. And but I'm not sure if there's a period, like a time period before they accept or decline. That I'm not sure about.
Okay.
Okay.
Again, like Ken said, I would probably defer to USCIS.
Okay.
Cool.
Sure.
That's all we have for right now. I'll go check and see if we got more.
Great. I have a feeling there'll be a few comments. There always are about this program because it tends to be a hot topic in this in the industry.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Well, if we didn't get to one of our viewers' questions, if we didn't get to your question, we can try our best to answer it in the comments on LinkedIn, so you can expect a comment from us. If you have a question that's especially pressing, we'll definitely be sure to try our best to answer that.
Yeah, we'll take a look. So definitely check back in the comments for any answers we can provide. And we'll also try to drop in a couple of links to the USCIS site, et cetera. Sharon, thanks so much. A ton of information here. It's obviously a very complicated series of programs, affects a lot of people, lots of changes. You know, this is obviously we'll be back. We're going to have you back soon to see what happens before April, of course. But thank you so much for being here and taking the time to explain this to us.
Of course, I really appreciate the opportunity to come back and talk about this. And thank you so much for bearing with my technology headaches.
Technology friend or
Thanks,
foe.
Sharon.
No, we'll definitely have you back. In the meantime, just a reminder, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're looking at us on the LinkedIn Live page, you can follow the Computer World page to see what episodes are coming up. Speaking of, next Tuesday, we're going to be talking to CSO's Lucian Constantine to talk about Cybersecurity Awareness Month. If you haven't heard of that by now, you must be dead because everybody and his brother is talking about it. So definitely check back next week for that. In the meantime, thanks, Juliet.
Yeah, thank
This
you.
was fun. Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
That's it for now.